Okay, so I'm gonna start with
Hello.
how you doing, Debo? Um,
Good.
I'm gonna start by going through when the Stop Woke bill was passed. So this was passed about a year ago, um, and I'm just gonna focus on the quotes from the main people, and then we'll go through the bill, and it's pretty short, but okay. Here are the main quotes taken away from it. And this the Stop Woke Act was created. If you guys remember, about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, between like 18 months to a year ago, there was a lot of conversation about CRT and anti-CRT legislation. Texas was one of them that was working on the legislation at the time. Florida was another, right? And they finally passed it early last year. And this is like one of the first consequences that we're seeing of that law. So we're going to go through them announcing the law's signing. So this is from Florida FLGov.com. So this is like the Florida website, right? So Governor Ron DeSantis signs legislation to protect Floridians from discrimination and woke indoctrination, right? So let's read through the major quotes. So today, Governor Ron DeSantis signed House Bill HB 7 to give businesses, employees, children, and families tools to stand up against discrimination and woke indoctrination. So here's the quote from DeSantis: "No one should be instructed to feel as if they are not equal or ashamed because of their race. In Florida, we will not let the far left woke agenda take over our schools and workplaces. There is no place for indoctrination or discrimination in Florida." Right? Another one. By signing this legislation, which is the first in the nation to end corporate wokeness and critical race theory in our schools, we are prioritizing education, not indoctrination. This is the lieutenant governor, the person who is second in charge of the state, right? Another quote by the commissioner of education at the time: "I'm grateful that Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature have taken a stand against discrimination, especially against revisionist history, ironic, and ideological concepts that are outside of Florida's academic standards." That came from the Commissioner of Education, Richard Cochran. Um, Another one. This is from the Senate President Wilton Simpson. "Every person is created equal and entitled to their dignity as an individual. We have heard concerns that students and workers are being pushed to adopt the personal or political viewpoints of employees, teachers, or textbook authors." Another one. House Speaker Chris Sproles: "Today, Florida took an important step to ensure that our schools and workplaces are spaces where we can have healthy instruction and conversation without losing sight that we are first and foremost individuals. Importantly, the bill provides assurance for parents that some of the most difficult lessons about our nation's history and current events are taught accurately while treating everyone as individuals." So this one's particularly important. We'll come back to this person later. Senator Manny Diaz Jr.: "I want to thank Governor DeSantis for being the most anti woke governor in our nation. No Floridian should ever be subjected to discriminatory content or rhetoric, especially when at school or in the workplace. Florida is committed to objectively teaching our students about important historical facts and events, not indoctrination." Another one. This is from a senior fellow and director at the Manhattan Institute on Critical Race Theory. "Critical race theory takes people and segregates them against each other. Individualism is not exclusive for any race, and it is patronizing to say people have different work ethic based on their skin color." And then the last few that I'll read, this is from, well, this one matter. It's not someone who works in the government. Now, here's what they tout as what's so great about it. It says HB 7 protects civil rights in employment and K to 20 education by specifying that subjecting an employee or student to a required activity that promotes, advances, or compels individuals to believe discriminatory concepts constitutes unlawful discrimination. So here's what they point out. It says concepts constituting unlawful discrimination include that members of one race, color, national origin, or sex are morally superior to members of another race, color, national origin, or sex. 2, a person by virtue of their race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. 3, a person's moral character or status as privileged or oppressed is determined by race, color, national origin, or sex. A person by virtue of their race, color, national origin, or sex should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment to achieve diversity, equity, or inclusion. And then it says this bill also requires instruction materials, and professional development in public schools to adhere to principles of individual freedom outlined in this bill. Those principles include that no person is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive just by virtue of his or her race or sex, and meritocracy or hard work ethic are not racist, but fundamental to the right to pursue success. All right. The last statement of here says schools are required to teach factual, or actually, let me start at the top. The bill also expands instruction of African American history to develop students' understanding of the ramifications of prejudice and racism. And then it says schools are required to teach factual information on topics including African American history, right? So now this was passed like Q1 in 2022, basically a year ago, right? Now let's read the actual bill instead of just taking their words for it. And I'll just point out the important parts that have to deal with the actual legislation. So this is about schools. So in this part, it says the State Board of Education is encouraged to adopt standards and pursue assessment of requirements of this subsection. Okay, it says the legislature acknowledges the fundamental truth that all persons are equal before the law and have inalienable rights. Accordingly, instruction and supporting materials on the topics enumerated in this section must be consistent with the following principles of individual freedom. So here's what they say. No person is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex. Excuse me. B, no race is inherently superior to another race. C, no person should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partially on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, disability, or sex. D, meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are not racist but fundamental to the right to pursue happiness and be rewarded for industry. E, a person by virtue of his or her race or sex does not bear responsibilities for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Sound familiar, y'all? F, a person should not be instructed that he or she must feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress for actions in which he or she played no part, committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Okay, so I'm sure all of us in this room, it probably doesn't take a rocket science to figure out what they're alluding to by making these statements. But this is the actual legislation, right? This is the part that pertains to the curriculum, right? Now, I could go up to the employment part and talk about what they outlawed in employment, but it's basically the same. Let me pull up at least a little part because it's not crazy long. Okay, let's see. Yeah, this one is the same. Where's the one on employment? Let me see if I can find it really quick. Okay, so unlawful employment practices. So it's basically the same list, right? Members of one race, color, sex, or national origin are morally superior to members of another race, color, sex, or national origin. These are like all the things you can't talk about, basically. An individual, by virtue of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Right? So basically the same thing. And then the end it says, you can't feel, guilt. Right? So this is the actual what's called the Stop Woke Act. This is the actual text of the bill. Right? Now, let's actually now go to the propaganda put out by the actual state. So this is what they have on their website. They talk about individual freedom, provides that subjecting individuals to specified concepts under certain circumstances constitutes discrimination based on race, color, sex, or national origin. Revising requirements for required instruction on the history of African Americans. Revising requirements for required instruction on the history of African Americans. Interesting. Requiring the department to prepare and offer certain standards in curriculum. Authorizing the department to seek input from a specified organization for specific purposes. Prohibits instructional materials reviewers from recommending instructional materials that can contain any matter that contradicts certain principles. Require the Department of Education to review school district professional development systems for compliance with certain provisions of law. Now let's go into their state-made propaganda. So this is from, again, Florida Gov website. So this is what they put out. Stop Woke Act. The Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act will be the strongest legislation of its kind. Schools Protecting Our Teachers and Students codifies the Florida Department of Education's prohibition on teaching critical race theory in K-12 schools. Prohibits school districts, colleges, and universities from hiring woke CRT consultants. Corporations Protecting Our Employees and Workplaces. Protects employees against a hostile work environment due to critical race theory training. Consequences, tools for employees and teachers to fight back. Provides employees, parents, and students a private right of action and strengthens enforcement authority of the Florida Department of Education. Right. So that's one of their propaganda materials that they put out. Here's the other one that they put out. So, freedom from indoctrination. Florida education includes the history of the United States, the Holocaust, and African Americans, the study of Hispanic and women's contributions to the United States, civics, character, and mental health education, conservation of natural resources. HB 7 also includes many new required components of African American history education. Will not include indoctrinating students with CRT principles such as members of one race, color, national origin, or sex are morally superior. A person by virtue of his or her sex or race, color, national origin, or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. A person's moral character or status as either privileged or oppressed is necessarily determined by his or her race, color, national origin, or sex. Such virtues as merit, excellence, hard work, fairness, neutrality, objectivity, and racial colorblindness are racist or sexist. So you basically can't mention none of that stuff, right? House Bill 7, which is the Stop Woke Act, first legislation of its kind in the nation, deems CRT training to be unlawful employment practice, ensures Florida's K through 20 students and employees are not subject to critical race theory indoctrination, requires development of stories of inspiration, curriculum to demonstrate important life skills and principles of individual freedom, consequences, tools for employees and teachers to fight back, reinforces that employees, parents, and students have a private right of action when discriminated against through CRT and CRT training, and gives the State Board of Education enforcement authority in K-12 settings. Okay, so I hope y'all are keeping up with this, but this is literally the propaganda put out by the Florida education system, right? Now that all of this happened Q1 of last year, basically, it was introduced and passed within the first 3 months of last year. Since then, the enforcement action is being taken at the highest level now with this AP African American history course that's being piloted by the College Board, right? So now let's read through what the actual state sent to College Board to justify them not including African American history for advanced placement. It says, this is to College Board. Please allow this letter to serve as confirmation that the Florida Department of Education, FDOE, does not approve the inclusion of the Advanced Placement AP African American Studies course in the Florida Course Code Directory and instructional personnel assignments adopted in the State Board of Education Rule 6A 109441, Florida's Administrative Code. As presented, the content of this course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. In the future, should College Board be willing to come back to the table with lawful, historically accurate content, FDOE will always be willing to reopen the discussion, right? So when they say the content of this course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. So let's assess both of those. First, let's assess inexplicably contrary to Florida law. Well, they're right. They just passed the Stop Woke Act about a year earlier, and it basically prohibits the educating people on basically anything that has to do with America's history and freedmen history in America. Now, the second part significantly lacks educational value. That is, I would say, more of an opinion based on them, again, trying to justify their actions, right? We're going to actually go through the syllabus next and start to look at the actual, what the syllabus says, because there's an image floating around on social media that's being put out by the same people who introduced this bill. And I'm seeing tons of people in the reparations community kind of just go along with this misinformation. So now that we read the letter to College Board, let's get back into this. And actually, I'm going to start with this tweet. So, okay, so this is the tweet that's going around, right? And it's sent out with the Florida Department of Education logo on it, and it has 6 sections talking about their concerns for AP African American Studies. Now, this is Manny Diaz Jr. He's the guy that celebrated the passing of CRT or the Stop Woke Act back when it was announced, and he's the guy that actually wrote the bill and introduced it. Now he is the Commissioner of Education in Florida. Okay, so the person who wrote the Stop Woke Act is now the head of the Department of Education in Florida, right? And he's the person that put this out, and it's been going around in circles without anyone doing any deep thought. Now, here's the leadership team for the Florida Department of Education. Office of the Commissioner, Manny Diaz Jr., Commissioner, Florida Department of Education. So he was a senator at the time that he wrote the bill, and now he's the Commissioner for Education over the entire state of Florida, right? Now let's go into the actual what they talk about, because this is entirely misleading. Like, let's just start with the topics. Topic 4.15, right? Now you go from topic 4.15 to topic 4.19 to topic 4.29 to topic 4.16 to topic 4.30 to 4.31. But it doesn't tell you how many topics there are. It doesn't tell you how many are even in this topic 4. So they give a very misleading kind of overview of what the actual curriculum is about. And if you go through the syllabus, which I'm about to pull up and I've actually looked at, it's 82 pages. And here how it's broken down. So Unit 1, Origins, Unit 2, Freedom, Unit 3, Practice of Freedom, Unit 4, Movements and Debates. Basically, there's 4 total sections that of content that the AP African American History course is composed of. So if you notice, going back to this, all of the so-called problematic topics are taken out of topic 4. There's no topics from 1, 2, 3, any of that, right? So let's go back and look into this with more detail. So again, this is the 4 units within the course, right? And only 1 unit out of all of the units is being singled out, and only 6 out of the entire number of chapters within that unit are being singled out. So let's go through and look at the numbers of chapters and sub-chapters and so on. Because I actually did the math to give you an accurate number, but just to keep going to show you what this is shaping up to look like. Okay. So here is the different units and weekly instructional focus. So the goal was to spend 5 weeks on unit 1, 8 weeks on unit 2, 7 weeks on unit 3, and 8 weeks on unit 4. And if you look at unit 4, it's still not broken down into the topics that are being referenced in the actual infographic that the Florida Department of Education, Manny Diaz, put out, right? So even by looking at this already, you already know that only 25% of the curriculum do they have a problem with in terms of units, but it's even less than that when you break it down into how the units are broken down into the topics. So here are the topics for unit 1. There is a total of, let's see, there's a total of 19 units or 19 topics in unit 1. Unit 2 has a total of, let's see, or 31 topics in unit 2. Unit 3, let's count that, has 20 topics. There's 20 topics in unit 3. And I did the number earlier, it was like 32 for unit 4. So now we get down to the topic level that is talked about in this infographic, right? If we actually do it in order, 4.15, 4.16, 4.19, 4.29, 4.30, 4.31, right? So 6, right? So how many topics are actually in total in unit 4? And just to show y'all, it's 32, right? 32 topics in unit 4. So 6 out of 32. I did this math earlier, but just for the audience, that's less than 20%. It's about 18% of this one unit is what they have a problem with. So 82% they don't have a problem with just in unit 4. And then they haven't mentioned any problem with the other 3 units, right? So out of 31, 20, 32. If you actually do it by all the units and multiply it out, you get about 5%. They reject, their answer to rejecting it is they disagreed with 5% of the content of the AP African American History course. And that's why they rejected it outright, which is equivalent to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And one of the topics is the actual reparations movement that they had a problem with, right? Excuse me. The reparations movement. All points and resources in this study advocate for reparations. There is no critical perspective or balancing opinion in this lesson, right? That's one of the reasons they rejected the reparations movement as a topic to discuss, right? Now, let's look at something else before we go on, because we're going to actually look deeper into the curriculum, so y'all can have a greater view. But let's go back to this, right? So again, these are the 4 units. They only reference 1 unit in their critique of the course, and they only reference 6 topics out of 32, right? And out of 118, something like that, they only object to 6 topics. They're currently in Florida. There's Japanese, German, European, and Hispanic AP courses that are approved, right? So let's put that also into context. And the last thing I want to point out is these tweets that Manny Diaz has put out before. So basically what they've done is they've turned the CRT into woke. They saw that CRT really wasn't helping them from a marketing standpoint. So they've rebranded it as woke, which is taken from the Friedman community anyways, but it's a bastardization of the word woke. And it basically, essentially translates to black or CRT today. And so, at least for them, you know what I mean? And so all of their topics, all of their bills are toward this approach. And so, most criticisms I've heard from Friedman deal with, topic 4.19 or topic 4.16, right? So 2 sections out of the 32 in Unit 4, and 2 out of the 118 sections, so even less than 5%, right? And so the main thing I wanted people to try to understand with all of this is they didn't ban this like DeSantis said the other day because, he's offended by like black queer studies. No, that is simply a marketing thing that he is kind of using to spread. And even again, in the propaganda that the Commissioner of Education in Florida put out, he literally puts out 6 topics out of all of them, and he doesn't even kind of give clear answers to why. And if we understand the Stop Woke Act, we know that they're using the Stop Woke Act to justify all of their actions legally. So I wanted to kind of take everybody through that timeline. For the rest of this, I kind of want to focus on the actual syllabus. It's an 82-page syllabus for the AP African American History course that was sent by the College Board to the Florida Department of Education, that they rejected and sent back that letter that we read earlier. But no one I've seen on Twitter has actually read through this 82-page syllabus, but are willing to back up the Stop Woke bill that is being used to enforce the banning of this course in Florida. So I want to give the full history, give the steps of how we actually got here, and actually spend time going through the syllabus instead of doing he say, she say, and people going off of propaganda put out by the actual government, to actually read what the primary source says and make a decision and judgment based on that, based on the legislation, the Stop Woke Act, based on the actual syllabus. Those are where we need to focus our attention, not on media propaganda and press releases put out by, or infographics put out by the same department that passed, the same guy that passed the Stop Woke Act, like I said, is now the head of Florida Education. So, or not passed it, but introduced the Stop Woke Act. He's now head of the education, Manny Diaz. So I want to add all this context because I see a lot of it missing in the Twitter sphere and even in the context of education on the media. And now I kind of want to just open it up to discussion so we could talk about it and look more at the actual conversation behind the syllabus and actually look through the syllabus ourselves rather than going off of what is told to us. So I'm going to open it up. Hey, Boogie, any thoughts? Black Majority, any thoughts? And then we'll go to Miss T and Debo. Anybody else welcome? How you doing, Rella?
Hey, no, Eric, man, this is like kind of like a lot of information to take in on what's actually happening here. So it's like really convoluted. So, I mean, between that and the messaging, I'm not even sure how you combat that, and how you, get that message to the people in Florida where it really matters, because that's the people that it's affecting the most, those kids in those states. So, yeah, man, it's just a lot to handle, and I'm not an educator, so, only thing I can do is, just bring awareness to the situation and kind of help in that kind of way. But, yeah, man, thanks for the breakdown. Yeah, man, it's just a lot going on. It's like so many fires everywhere. It's, reparations is the goal. So, it's kind of like a distraction, but at the same time, it is very important. So, I understand the complex situation, and, we just gotta, fight what we can. So, that's all I get.
Yeah, just to go on that, you can't even talk about reparations or the reparations movement. That's one of the things that they had a problem with. Remember, so it's kind of ironic.
It's kind of like codified in the language, like how they do things. So it's very deceitful in how they try to frame things. So
right.
So the media manipulation. So it's all like a big game. So,
exactly. This is why we have to separate kind of what's being kind of conveyed to us and go through again the primary sources. Read the Stop Woke Act. That takes you directly to the College Board letter that they sent. Then read the syllabus. That's the important. Those are the three important documents that you really need to read. The Stop Woke Act.
Also, when you're talking about the people who wrote the legislation and who was in control of it, so it's kind of like, man, it's like with everything I see within the system, it's like it's a double-edged sword. No matter what direction we run in, and it's up to the people to kind of be awoke to what's being put in front of them, or being kind of the words are being jumbled and make it deceitful. So it's a lot. It's just a lot.
Yeah, so, exactly. So beyond the documents, the Stop Woke Act, the letter to the College Board, and the AP African American History syllabus, the other key insight is to follow the people. So beyond following the bills and the actual like government written stuff, like the government wrote the bill for Stop Woke Act, Manny Diaz, right? So that's the person you need to connect. And then you look at the College Board letter, right? Well, who's head of the Florida Department of Education? Manny Diaz, right? And then you get to the actual syllabus, right? And then you can look at that objectively in the context of those other two facts. The fact that the person who wrote the Stop Woke Act is now the head of the education in Florida, the Commissioner of Education. Black majority, then Marion, then Miss T, then Marion, then Rella.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Freedom Party, A Boogie, Miss Rella, Miss Only Male Cruz, and Miss T, and everyone else. So I got a couple points. The first thing I want to say is it really shows the power of the state, the governor, state legislator to control these systems within their jurisdictions. I believe that if someone who feels victimized by this particular legislation files a lawsuit and declares it as unconstitutional, restricting their free speech, they may have grounds for a case in some areas of it. But the other two things where they say no person is inherently racist, that sounds like they're trying to essentially codify white supremacy into state law in a very different way. It is very likely that they had constitutional scholars.
Come on, say it now. Say it now. Say it.
Really looking at a way to word that in a way that it would pass constitutional muster, because as long as they're in control, if they can uphold that, man, anyone who's not in control is really, really powerless. And then the other one was the past, and I didn't get to write it down, but essentially it said they're not responsible for anything in the past. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, if you take that same reasoning and apply it to criminal acts, in other words, if somebody commits a murder on Wednesday, are they no longer eligible for prosecution because it happened in the past? Seems a little weird right there. So I don't know if that's just applying to the education or if they're trying to apply that to actual physical historical circumstances. So that's all
Yeah, that's a good insight. Yeah, this applies mainly. The bill applies to like education and to employees at workplaces. But it's a great point that you talked about the past. Let me see if I can pull up that part, because that was an interesting part, right? So an individual, by virtue of his or her race, color, sex, or national origin, bears responsibility for or should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of actions committed in the past by other members of the same race, color, sex, or national origin. Like, that's literally kind of like you said, them trying to put their white supremacist ideology into legislation, right? Literally saying, hey, anything that happened in the past, even if my great granddaddy did it, I'm not responsible for that, right? And even if I still benefit from the wealth that was extracted then, that I'm not responsible for, right? And I think what it does is it really kind of like gives them a crowbar to try to literally they're trying to. This is like reverse racism legislation, right? Like, you can't hurt my feelings, or you can't talk about racism in the past because now that would be racist. Like, it's kind of crazy. And so it's a mental backflip. It's a mental kind of gymnastics that is truly impressive, that they're, like you said, constitutional lawyers are mulling over how to make sure this doesn't get struck down, right? So definitely agree with you there. Let's go to Miss T, and then Marion, and then Rella.
Hey, Eric. Thank you for hosting this space. Hey, everybody in the room. I'm confused because I was okay with Ron DeSantis rejecting it based on them having LGBTQ in the teachings. If that was the situation, I was okay with that because.
Ms. T, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Were you okay with them rejecting reparations, the reparations movement?
Who?
Florida. That was one of the reasons that they gave for rejecting the AP African American History course, was the reparations movement.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I just found that out from you reading that tonight. I just found that out tonight.
So this is literally put out by the government. This is what they said. This is Manny Ruiz put this out, or Manny Diaz. He put this out, basically saying, well, these are the reasons, to be more specific, after the very vague kind of letter that they sent, where they're like, it lacks educational value and is against our laws, aka the Stop Woke Act.
Okay, so now, when did he put that information out, the more detailed information?
So that tweet was from the 20th. So the January 12th was the letter. If I got my dates correctly, let me pull it up really quick.
So the 20th.
Yeah, the 12th was the letter, and then the 20th was that tweet. with the whole like blue background and 6 sections or 6 topics.
All right. So now I see this post. It says, excellent news. This is as of 2 hours ago. It says, the Florida Department of Education will review the changes for compliance once resubmitted.
So that's kind of like the boilerplate BS they put in the letter. Basically, what they're trying to use that for is like trying to not seem. It's like trying to wash their hands from blood, right? They're basically trying to say, well, we're not going to totally reject this. Just take out all the parts we said we don't like and bring it back to us, and then we'll reconsider it. That's just more propaganda that they're putting out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it said College Board to update AP African American Studies framework rejected by DeSantis.
Basically, when new AP courses get introduced, they go through a pilot phase where they're tested out, and then before they're distributed all over the country. So basically, what they're trying to say is, well, and this is mainly like being pushed by this agenda of saying, well, it's not that we have a problem with African American history. We just have a problem with what they included in it. See what I'm saying? They're trying to, again, like absolve themselves of the reasons of why they did it.
Okay, because the first thing they pushed out was that it had all this LGBT stuff in it.
No, the first thing they put out was the actual letter, and the letter doesn't state anything that happened on the 20th, right? So the letter just says it goes against our laws and it lacks educational value, right? So the going against our law is the Stop Woke Act, which was an anti-CRT bill that came into law about a year ago. And then you have the actual January 20th, after the letter, about 8 days later after the letter, you have Manny Ruiz, who wrote the Stop Woke Act, come out with this justification using this infographic of 6 topics that supposedly they're against being included, one of them being reparations.
Okay, so at this point, it's in the hands of who, Ron DeSantis, to resubmit it?
No. So at this point, since it's already been rejected by the Florida Department of Education, this goes back into kind of like the article title you brought up. Basically, College Board would have to resubmit a new version to see if they'll accept it the next time, basically. So, again, going more into this, like, oh, we're not against it. We just want you to change it to our desires, and then we'll potentially accept it, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Marion, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks for having the space, and thanks for allowing me to speak. I just have a quick question. When I first, I'm an educator myself. I'm a college professor, and when I first heard about this case, and I heard about an 82-page syllabus, I was like, wow, that's pretty long. And so my question is, I just have a question. For AP classes at high school level, is that typical to have that many pages in the syllabus? Because I'm wondering, of course, they have issues that you phrase with it, but I'm wondering if it's because they had so much detail and kind of showed too much of the course. But maybe that's what is asked for. So does anyone know? Is it 82-page syllabus?
So yeah,
or that's normal?
it's actually a great question, because I'm going to show you as I was looking through. So it mentions the 4 topics, right? But then as you go down and you try to learn about like once they break it down into, let me try to find it. Okay. So once they break down the topics into their like weekly focus and what each topic is going to be, then they get into Unit 1, Instructional Exemplar, Origins of the African Diaspora, 5 weeks, right? So basically they're giving a template, like this is how every unit should look. Because when I kept scrolling, like we're on page 28 now based on what it says, but if I keep scrolling, I don't get to Unit 4, Instructional Exemplar, debates and movements and debates or whatever it's called, right? And the reason I'm pointing that out is they only give like what one chapter would look, or what one unit would look like in detail, and they don't actually spell out Unit 4 in detail, or Unit 2 or Unit 3, right? So they're kind of using this as a template and kind of just saying, well, based on this, go and make the rest in line with these objectives. And from what I've looked at in terms of the College Board, I can pull up the website. The College Board basically has this process for when they're piloting a course. So AP African American History is a new course that's being introduced. So it's being piloted. And in that pilot, they kind of give teachers and instructors kind of this template to go off of, and then they can develop the rest of the course material. It actually would be longer if they spelled out the other 3 units, right? So it's, I did find that interesting that it only included one kind of just as a template and everything. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Awesome. How you doing, Rella? Good to see you in here. What are your thoughts?
Thanks, man. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing good. Good to hear your voice.
You too. Hi, everybody. I was actually driving in the car, but I had actually read this the other day. And so I was trying to follow along with you. So now I'm back at home and I'm pulling up my laptop now so I can follow along. But my thoughts off the top of my head without actually looking at the framework that you're looking at, the pieces you're looking at, is that I really believe what Gray mentioned. I agree, or I should say Black mentioned, and I do believe that this is kind of like their soft shoe-in to actually move the goalposts and actually have white supremacy be the language, meaning that if the ideology that they want to push, the theory that they want to push is that anything uncomfortable cannot exist, and that the people who actually do not have descendants or cannot map their also lineage to this country, they themselves are not trying to be held responsible in their lineage in regards to pointing out historical frameworks in education. That's the one other piece. Because if you look at Diaz and you look at DeSantis, which I also did a space about, they are second. I don't know if Diaz is first generation or second. I have not done any mock-up on him yet. But DeSantis is second generation American. Am I right? Yeah, second generation. His parents were first. He's second. And so Diaz, if we are following the same logic of stock, Diaz could possibly first or second generation. And these people would not have any type of connection to American descendants from 1865, or even we can say even around 1877, or hell, probably the 1900s, beginning of the 1900s. They would have came after probably the 1960s or the 1970s. So when we look at it that way, we really need to, as Black says, we need to find the power in the stock and actually understanding that we have to get the authority over the state's representatives. But we also, as some people may feel powerless, need to actually get to a point where we now start to call out people who do not actually have these particular historical references or can't even actually speak in the lens of what American history is. They should not be in policy. And we have to make that a thing where we're calling that out, because it becomes now a problem where we're talking about the Revolutionary War all over again. Not the Civil War, or it could be combined the two, but really the Revolutionary War all over again. Because now you're talking about we're having small, mini threats of people who have decided, well, I'm going to align with one ideological group, and that's the group of supremacy. And because that fits the narrative, as long as I agree, I can write myself into the equation just by using this language. However, the language would not fit for us. It wouldn't fit for us because the language actually erases us out of the equation by ignoring our historic and genetic identity here in the United States, or American lineage here in the United States. So that's just me, critical thinking, but Y'all tell me what y'all think.
Hey, you can't be critical race thinking up in here, brother. It's against Florida law.
That's right. Okay, so can we call it critical ethnicity thinking or
critical. I was gonna say lineage. Yeah. Yeah, that's hilarious. You know what I want to do real quick? Actually, they have these like 6 sections, right? So let's read through what it actually says in the syllabus. So, topic 4.15. Let's see what it says compared to what they try to complain about. Let's see if it's actually the same or anything like that. Okay. So topic 4.15, intersectionality and activism. So here it says the topic examines intersectionality as an analytical framework and its connection to Chicana and Asian American feminist thought. Students may explore a text from the writings of Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins, or Angela Davis. And then in the critique, it says intersectionality is foundational to CRT and ranks people based on their race, wealth, gender, and sexual orientation. And then included reading, they have like Angela Davis on here. They say self-avowed communist and Marxist. So they're trying to really stir up the Florida people who came from communist countries and, you know, are pro-capitalist, right? Okay, now let's do 4.16. Black feminist literary thought. This topic explores the literary contributions of Black feminists and womanist writers. Students may examine a literary text from authors such as Toni Morrison, Glory Naylor, Bell Hooks, and Nikki Giovanni. And then on the criticism side, it says included reading Bell Hooks, an author of many intersectionality texts, and in the recommended reading states, I began to use the phrase in my work, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, because I wanted to have some language that would actually remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality. Even their answers for why they banned this stuff is like kind of silly and kind of shows their true colors, right? Okay, what's the next one? 4.19, Black Queer Studies. Let's read that. Black Queer Studies. This topic explores the concept of the queer of color critique grounded in Black feminism and intersectionality as a Black studies lens that shifts sexuality studies toward racial analysis. Students may examine texts by writers such as Kathy Cohen, Roderick Ferguson, or E. Patrick Johnson. And then in the concerns, it says Roderick Ferguson, who exclaims, we have to encourage and develop practices whereby queerness isn't a surrender to the status quo of race, class, gender, and sexuality. It means building forms of queerness that reject the given realities of the government and the market. Okay, 4.29, I think is the next one. So let's read 4.29. Movements for Black Lives. The topics explores the origins, mission, and global influence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for Black Lives. Students may examine a primary source text, photographs, or secondary text from scholars such as Keeanga Yamahtta Taylor and Leslie K. Jones. And then let's see what the concerns on that one says. It says Movement for Black Lives is an organization with stated objectives that include eliminating prisons and jails, ending pretrial detention, and concluding the war on Black, trans, queer, gender nonconforming, and intersex people. So, I mean, it didn't say anything on that actual thing. Included reading is Leslie K. Jones, who wrote, every day Black people produce an unquantifiable amount of content for the same social media corporations that reproduce the white supremacist superstructures that oppress us. They didn't like that strong condemnation. Okay, 4.30 is the reparations movement. This topic explores the case for reparations for the centuries-long enslavement and legal discrimination of African Americans in the U.S. Students may examine House Bill H.R. 40 and a text by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So obviously we're not a fan of HR 40, but you're not limited to, again, what they put in here. This is kind of like a boilerplate. Let's read the concerns. Oh yeah, the concerns was all points and resources in this study advocate for reparation. There is no critical perspective or balancing opinion in this lesson. Basically, they're saying there's no white author that you're going to read that denies reparations. There's no Douglas Murray, reading material, right? Okay, 4.31. This is the last one. 4.31, Black Study and Black Struggle in the 21st Century. This topic explores reflections on the evolution of Black studies and the field's salience in the present through a text by scholars such as Robin D.G. Kelley. And then in their concerns, it says Robin D.G. Kelley argues that activism rather than the university system is the catalyst for social transformation. Kelley's first book was a study of Black communists in Alabama. Kelley warns that simply establishing safe spaces and renaming campus buildings does nothing to overthrow capitalism. So those were the topics, the 6 topics outlined as concerns by the Florida Department of Education, mainly Manny Diaz. And then we read through what the syllabus says, and then we read through what the concerns were brought up by Manny Diaz and friends. So any other last thoughts before we start to wrap up? Go for it, Black.
Okay, so the Angela Davis part, I think, because we just had this communist space last week, and so I want to say this, man. Black communists, they may be very nice people, but they are not aligned with Black America ideologically. They have a different thing that they're into, and it's subversive. It's they like to infiltrate. I think that was put in there for a reason, and so I just want to say that.
Yeah, it was put in there for the reason of geography. Florida is close to former communist countries. A lot of people fled communist countries like Cuba to come to America. Now they're voters in Florida. He knows this will play well to his base, right? And that's a trend amongst other people who fled communist countries. So they're kind of using it as a marker. The other thing I will say, in terms of what you said, in terms of ideology, I do overall agree. I think it was somewhat of a hijacking of a lot of our politics. But the main insight that we have to take away from when people are being called communists, especially Black people that are being called communists, is that what is communism? Well, in Russia, you had a communist party, and in China, you still have the Chinese Communist Party, or the Communist Party of China, right? And so all of these are just political parties. And rather than being manipulated by a foreign political party like the CPC, the Communist Party of China, or the former USSR, understand that we need our own party, we need our own agenda, and we need to push our own issues. And that was the main thing that I noticed when I went back through the history, is that instead of creating a party of our own, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement, obviously you had Fannie Lou Hamer, the Freedom Democratic Party, that was destroyed after 4 years. And then you had the Black Panther Party that was destroyed after 16 years. With both of those, instead of creating a new party, people like Angela Davis, who was part of the Black Panther Party, bought into this international communist party, right, ideology, which, again, I think that was instead of, again, developing our own independent party that is Friedman founded, they adopted a party that is founded by foreigners who don't have Friedman issues as their number one agenda item, right? So that's just something I just noticed. Like, we got to stop following for other people's parties. The Nazis were a political party. The country that became the USSR was founded by a communist political party, and China as well, right? So we just got to understand, like, political parties are important in almost any government and how it's ran. And instead of kind of fawning for, again, international parties of other countries and other nations, we develop our own Freedmen focused one, which is what we're doing with the Freedmen Party. But definitely wanted to kind of touch on that. Thank you, Black. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up?
I didn't get to hear the what was the question that you asked, Freedman?
No, I was just kind of pointing out that, like, the Communist Party, like, because they're trying to use Florida or communism in this Florida propaganda to try to trigger voters who come from communist countries to kind of support their efforts. So I just pointed out that communism is derived from a political party, one in Russia, which became the USSR, and the other in China, which still exists as the Communist Party of China, that runs a country of over 1.4 billion people, right? So there's one political party in China, right? Just like in Nazi Germany, there was one political party. How you doing, Kiara? Can you hear me, Kiara?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm about to wrap up, but I know you're in Florida, and I care about what you think. So, any thoughts on this? I know you came in late, but I know you probably have this in your bones since you're in Florida.
Well, actually, I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to plug a space I'm going to be doing in a couple weeks or next weekend, February 4th. I'm going to be talking to the president of the National Council for Black Studies, as well as a ninth grade African American history teacher in Florida, and we're going to be, talking about the ban and also the Stop Woke Act. So I'm gonna post it into. I'm just going to put in Jumbotron real quick. I'm going to put it in the comment section. But it's going to be on February 4th. That's Saturday at 2 o'clock Eastern.
Awesome.
It's going to build on what you spoken about tonight.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say, we read through the Stop Woke Act, because I think that's a proper context to place all this in. If you start with just recent events, you're not going to understand that the Stop Woke Act was passed a year earlier, right? When all the anti-CRT talk was going on. I remember us even having a space about what was happening in Texas, because Texas was trying to do the same type of thing, right? And theirs didn't pass because people called it out and they kind of tried to roll things back. They might have kind of tried to roll it forward again, and I haven't checked recently, but Florida's passed. And then we read through, like, the guy who passed it, Manny Diaz, is now the commissioner of the Florida education system, or the guy who wrote this Stop Woke Act is now the commissioner of education. And he's the one that put out that infographic with the 6 topics that has been going kind of viral in the Black community, and people kind of focusing on really 2 topics primarily out of the 6 that are listed, and only 6 out of the 100 plus topics that are actually in the course. These are all like less than 5% of the overall syllabus. So it's a bunch of cherry picking, I'm noticing, rather than looking at the full context. So I'm excited for that, and I'll definitely tune in. So thank you for that. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up? What up, Harriet? I see you in here.
I wanted to say that earlier, so I wanted to say I really think that there was a video I saw about how, Miami or even in places in Florida, they are, as you mentioned, are using other people coming from other countries to push this whole narrative. And there was a video about a woman talking about how when people come from other countries, there are a lot of benefits down in Florida that they do receive. And she was speaking mainly a lot of in the surrounding Miami area, and how that is a big impact in it when it comes to them getting citizenship and becoming voters. So hopefully maybe one day we can actually digest, kind of like unpack all of that, and then see how that actually impacts Florida. And Kiara will probably be a good host, I think, for maybe a space like that.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's Kiara. I had to master it too. Don't worry.
Dang, I thought I was doing good.
I know, me too. I called it Sierra. I thought it was on point. I was like, excuse me. What up, Harriet? How you doing, bro?
What's up, family? I just want to check in on y'all and speak to the topic, if that's fine.
Of course, of course, of course.
I just want to say that. It's being banned because they want to continue our erasure, when they want to submit us to the bottom, make sure that this message isn't getting out, and that's what I wanted to speak on. Like, they can't stop this. They can ban that class all they want to. These children, or and us as freemen, we can share this information with our family now. They don't have control over quote unquote minds. Y'all don't have control over education no more, because we can just Google. You know what I'm saying? We can just Google this. You know what I'm saying? So they stopping that African American history being taught in school. But on Twitter Spaces right now, we got the Freeman AP class happening right here. The Freeman American Placement class happening right here. You know what I'm saying? The Foundational Black American Advanced Placement class happening right here, right now. So they're not stopping anything. You get what I'm saying? Like, they're going by old rules. We're going by new rules. And we breaking their old tools. So this is the Freeman AP class. And I'm putting this out in the lexicon now. We're going to have an official Freeman AP class, a real one with books and all of that. And my people, y'all can take this idea, it's forced to take this idea and run with it, because our lineage is tied to the emancipation, chattel slavery, everything that we built here, and can't nobody take that from us. Can nobody take our freeman status away from us? So do as you please with that class. We gonna keep doing what we doing with class. Peace, power, and reparations.
Thank you for that, Harry. You always come in dropping mics. Before I go to Stephanie, let me say this. There is, one thing I did think about while reflecting on this. So one of the things, putting myself in the shoes of a student in school today, like in high school today, right? I'm 28, so going back a few years. But if I was in high school today and I wanted to take AP African American history, I couldn't do it in Florida unless I went to a private school, essentially, because this ruling only affects public schools. And I thought about this in the context of my own education. So, like, for 2 years, I was in Philly, and my last 2 years of high school, I was in Philly, and my junior year of high school only had 2 AP classes out of like all the numerous AP classes that are offered, right? And my senior year, I was able to transfer to a better school that had basically almost every AP class, right? My point in saying this is your access to AP courses does not only it determines your GPA, but also determines your credits when you transfer into college as well, which can determine how much tuition you have to pay, because it determines how long you'll be in school for, right? And so when I think about this in the context of people that are kids today, going through this, if I'm a Black kid in Florida and I want to take AP African American history, I can't do it if I'm in a public school. I would have to have gone to a private school that is still willing to teach this course, right? Despite what the government says, because they don't have power over private institutions, right? Only this applies to public schools, right? And I went to public schools all my life, right? So in that sense, like, we have to understand like who this is affecting the most. It's affecting the kids who go to public school the most. The kids at all the private schools, they get all the AP classes in the world, right? So he's really limiting the classes, and we know primarily that a lot of freedmen are the ones actually in public school, right? We have less access to wealth and capital to put our kids into private schools and things like that. So I just want you all to keep that in mind too, like the value that AP credits give you in what your GPA can be, and then how that then translates into opportunities for college, and then how that then translates into credits for college as well. But just something to keep back in your mind if you have kids, especially kids in Florida, who may have to deal with this. Any last thoughts before we wrap up? Oh, Stephanie, my bad. Stephanie, go for it.
Hey, Mr. Freeman. Hello, Chad. I'm a little under the weather, but I have to say this. Don't stop fighting. We have a long way to go. It's an uphill battle, but we're going to do it. Isn't this guy Manny Diaz, isn't he some type of Cuban or something? And don't they align themselves with, I think, communism as well? If not,
they're anti-communist. Like, basically the people who came here from Cuba and other places, they fled Castro's communism because they were usually like some of the richest people and they didn't want their wealth redistributed. So they were like, no, let's go to America.
Yeah. Okay, I knew it was one of them, but they still align themselves with white supremacy. They invoke in their inner conquistador spirit. So, that's to be expected with people like this. So this is why, they're not to be trusted either. And, like I said, I don't have too much to say, but I just wanted to say, don't stop fighting. And we have to let people know that we are here to stay. We refuse to be erased out. And I'm tired of doing this. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I hope you feel even better sooner. Always good to see you in these spaces. I'll give last thoughts to Eddie and Kiara. I want Kiara to plug her thing one more time as well, so she can make sure people set reminders for that.
Go ahead, Kiara.
Sure. Thank you. So on February 4th, that's Saturday, February 4th, 2 o'clock Eastern. Oh, okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay. He's a co-host. Okay. Yeah. February 4th, 2 o'clock Eastern, Saturday. I'm going to be hosting a space with the president of the National Council for Black Studies and a current ninth grade African American history teacher here in Florida. So we're going to be talking about, this whole stop woke thing and the AP African American Studies being all that, just building off of today's conversation as well. And you can find that at my other pages at Florida Freedman. You can see it up in the Jumbotron. I put it in the chat box as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Definitely check it out. Set your reminders. A Boogie, go for it.
Nothing to add, man. Just thank you for the space. Thank you for the breakdown of everything that you displayed tonight. Thank you for all the speakers and the listeners as well. We're going to ask anybody who's unfamiliar, though. We did start our own political party, the Freedman Party. So if you want to check out the webpage or join or donate or get behind any of our initiatives, it's freedman.party. Once again, that's freedman.party. You can check out our website. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you for that, bro. Also, a special shout out to Label It. He's in the room. Label It. I was looking for all over the internet earlier today. I was like, I went through all the videos I could hear of like mainstream media talking about the topic. And then one of the dudes, what's his name? Because he actually retweeted me back like mad late, but let me see what his name is again. I forget. It was the first time we actually seeing him. But he's like Donald Trump's lawyer or some shit like that. But he was arguing with Bakari Sellers. Oh, his name is David Urban, right? And he was arguing with Bakari Sellers on this whole thing, right? And he tells Bakari Sellers, David Urban, he's like, I was reading through this 82-page syllabus, his lying self, right? And he's like, I can send it to you, telling Bakari, I can send to you this 82-page syllabus. I'm like, you know what? I have not seen anybody post this 82-page syllabus, but everybody is posting what that Manny Diaz dude posted, right? And so I'm like, damn, where is this 82 syllabus? I went on Google, right? 82-page syllabus, Florida, trying to find it. I could not find it anywhere. So I went on Twitter. I was like, anybody have a link to this thing? And then Label It was the first person that responded. I even tagged the David Urban Brewer. I was like, man, I don't like this dude. I don't even know him, but I'm gonna ask him too, right? Because he said he got it. So I asked just Twitter, and Label It responded faster than David Urban. He ended up responding later, and he sent me the same link that Label It did. So I thought that was funny. So Label It's the plug. So I really appreciate that. It helped me actually go through the 82 pages before this space, so I could actually, present this content to y'all in a respectable manner. So yeah, special shout out to him. With that, I want to just say thank y'all all the listeners, all the great speakers, my co-hosts, and everyone for coming. We'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. So make sure to tune in. And with that, y'all have a great and blessed day. Peace.